Carried. Okay, extraordinary items. We do not have any extraordinary items that I'm aware of. Thank you so much for not raising it. And I'd also like to welcome our Deputy Mayor, Bill Cashmore, back from representing us in Wellington. Welcome, sir. Good to have you back. Okay, we are now on to our local boards. Welcome to our local board chairs and our local board representatives that are online. May I please invite Helgard to the table. So Helgard will take us through an introduction, members, before we hear from our local boards. And you should all have this memo that he sent us, which was part of a workshop that was held last week on this. So hopefully it's not coming to you guys fresh.
Good morning, councillors. As you're aware that today local boards will be presenting to you their input on the RLTP. The purpose of me speaking to you is just at a request to provide you with the introduction and the major themes that have emanated from the local boards in their input. You will note from the report that you have on the agenda that it's set out what the responses to the local boards. Attached to that would be all the resolutions and feedback that the local boards have provided you, and the local board chairs and representatives will be speaking to that. As has been stated by the chair, the particular report that you have in front of you, you would recognise as being very similar to the memo that you received at the workshop last week. And we had presented that to you at that stage so that when you look at it today, it's not fresh, that it is something that you may be familiar with. So the major themes that we have coming up are the following as they are on the slides. The first is then the Local Board Initiatives Fund. Well, we probably all know it rather as the Local Board Transport Capital Fund. Then there's the climate change and the environment, travel choices, safety, and access and connectivity. Those were the large themes that emanated from the local board resolutions. Going into a bit more detail, clearly all the local boards were quite delighted to see the $20 million now allocated in the to the Local Board Initiatives Fund. And they noted that this is crucial for the achieving small-scale local improvements, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists. And there was some local boards that then also sought clarity as to the previously allocated funding that was lost when the emergency budget came through. As far as climate change and the environment, most local boards have supported the response to the climate change initiatives, but it was noted by a number of boards that the current proposals do not allow us to achieve the Auckland climate change targets. That was noted by some of them. They generally supported reducing the vehicle kilometre travelled and the mode shift that had been proposed. Public transport, there's a noting of some of the local boards, particularly the ones in the rural and outlying areas, that the public transport and active transport is not available for people in those particular areas, and that was noted by them. And also that public transport tend to bring people into the city, and that therefore local journeys are not always, that the public transport is not always available and suitable for that. And so that resulted in them coming to resolutions that focus on access to local destinations and amenities. And there was also some support in, well, a lot of support in the citywide cycle network. Some of the local boards then also raised the issue of the impact of the network on the environment. This is stuff. This is items such as quality, water quality, and pest plant control, and that type of things that are still issues that come out of the network. Then moving on to travel choices. Local boards tend to all agree that walking and cycling is a core business of Auckland Transport, and that the focus should be then on creating and maintaining safer footpaths and walkways, and providing more bus shelters, and improving the dedicated bus and transit lanes as items. You'll see then obviously in the slides, increase the safety, and behaviour changes such as safe schools and travel-wise. There was also a recognition of the impact of this on the lower income residents, and that there was a need for equity when we're dealing with this. And New Park and Right extended facilities well connected to the travel transport, which was also mentioned by those local boards in the outlying areas. Safety. Well, the local boards endorsed the allocation of $10 million for its community safety fund, and there was a fair amount of support for that the engineering solution should be that it assists with safety. And there was a request for investment of for safety near schools, and then measures to address speed limits. A lot of requests for investment into transport that reduces deaths, serious injuries, and also recognition of the harm that transport does for air pollution and noise control. And local boards also noted that active transport also improves public health, and there was a lot of reference to the Healthy Streets framework. Accessibility and connectivity. Whilst there was a lot of support for new housing developments, it was recognised that that this needs to also have a focus on public transport and connectivity for active modes. Concentration of investment into existing urban areas, and this that was supported, particularly for climate change reasons and for the continuing of the funding renewals at the required rate. In the outlying areas, in the rural areas, there was investment for unsealed roads and changes to sealing methods citywide, particularly with obviously a focus on cycling in mind. There was commentary about rail crossings and grade separation, and a lot of the local boards also concerned about a proposal around like-for-like renewals, and thought that this was really an opportunity to take a new approach as far as that is concerned. And those were essentially the items that the local boards had raised in a broader sense. And quite clearly, each of the local boards is going to come and address you on their particular issues, but this is the overarching of it. And what the recommendation is within the report is really for you to take into account the local board input when you consider the RLTP and the endorsement required when it goes to the Auckland Transport Board for its approval. Thank you, Councillors.
Thank you, Helgaard. Are there any questions for Helgaard? Councillor Kuhn.
Thank you. Kia ora. Thank you for that. I just had two questions kind of around the process, and it probably best to ask Helgaard rather than each individual local board. One is, I understand there was quite some concern about a local board's ability to engage in this whole process, particularly around whether local boards could present to the Transport Committee, which seems to be a bit unfortunate, and it would have been good to have that sort of streamlined and really decided up front. So it'd be good to have a comment about that. And also just wanted to clarify in terms of collating the feedback, where it says, going through each of the local boards, you've kind of collated it, say 10 local boards supported X. Is that's not saying that 21 local boards didn't support a thing, so you can't read it like that because it's not quite clear. It's more that each local board, that number of local boards might have mentioned that in their feedback or elevated it, but I also see there's some nuances, like say Franklin local board has said don't support investment in cycling in the city centre, but support cycle in their own area. So it'd be good to kind of just have some clarity around how the feedback's being collated. Thank you.
Councillor, through the Chair, the second question is perhaps the shorter answer, and that is indeed the fact that it notes 10 local boards supported a particular does not indicate at all that 11 local boards didn't support it. It was simply that this was much more explicitly stated by those 10 local boards. And you've also correctly identified that it covers a range of responses, each with their own permutations. The request to us was really to try and extract themes rather than go into the detail of each of those responses. So your remarks in this regard is absolutely correct. Back to the first question, it is indeed so that the RLTP, the local boards had no opportunity to give any input into the development of the original draft RLTP. Subsequently, their only opportunity to engage and give input to it was during a public hearings process conducted by Auckland Transport, in which 10 of the local boards took that opportunity to present. Subsequently, and the only opportunity the local boards really have to give input to it is today. There was, at the workshop earlier last week, attendance by some of the chairs of local boards, but today is essentially the essence of it. And indeed, it could have been improved upon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe it's something we need to note for next time, because it's kind of too late at this point in some ways. But of course, hearing all the very keen to hear the feedback.
Okay, Councillor Dalton. Thank you, Councillor Coombe.
My question has been answered. Thank you. It was how many local boards took the opportunity to speak to the Board of Auckland Transport, and that was 10. Thank you.
Yes, I saw the Facebook post go up when they did that. Okay, Councillor Casey, and then Councillor Walker.
Helga, it's a question that I actually put to Auckland Transport, and that was the local boards had quite a lot of advocacy items in their submissions, and I wanted to know how Auckland Transport are going to, A, decide if they support it, and B, respond to the local boards in terms of their submissions, especially the advocacy items which, you know, could be new departures.
I am informed by Auckland Transport that they will, as they call it, close the loop on this and get back to the local boards on it. The detail of it is unknown to me, but upon inquiry to them, they said that they would get back to the local boards on it.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Walker.
Sure. So I understand from what you say that the existing process is pretty inadequate when it comes to involving local boards early on. Would it be appropriate to have some resolution to the effect that we actually change the process so that next time around we do it differently?
Through the Chair, Councillor Walker, one must remember that the process this year changed from the previous time. It's as a result of the CCO review recommendation. It had indicated a closer collaboration between the Council and Auckland Transport in dealing with the RLTP. And this came out well after the process for development of the RLTP had commenced. And so the time for adjustment was very short. One assumes that in the future, with a bit more time, a better refinement of this would be done. It's simply just that the turnover was very short.
So my question is around a directive to that effect. Otherwise, is it going to happen?
At best, I can respond by saying that you would note from the response from some of the local boards that they have resolved to request that the process gets improved.
Yep, and we have a response from our Chief of Strategy.
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, it absolutely is. We knew that this one was not going to be the kind of process that we wanted. It absolutely will be different. It's already, you know, once the RLTP gets finalised at the end of June, we will begin to improve it from there. So it's an absolute from me. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walker. Thank you, Helga. Councillor Newman.
Well, it's kind of just been addressed, I guess, Chair. I don't think the questioning of Helgard in relation to a process for which he's not responsible is really that helpful. I think this is a matter that needs to be addressed probably through the expectations letter that the Mayor and the Chair and the CE of Auckland Transport will consider, will talk about, that there would need to be a different form of engagement with local boards at the direction setting stage, and that would inform the early iterations of the RLTP, and that if need be, there is an opportunity for further input through the hearings process. But I don't think that this is the time to channel it through Helgaard. He's not responsible for that.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Newman, and thank you for that insight, and apologies that we let you have to answer that question, Helgaard. You're quite right, Councillor Newman, and our Chief of Strategy has also picked that up, so thank you. Okay, members, are we ready to hear from our local boards? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sayers, sorry, missed that.
That's right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was basically going to raise the same point as Councillor Newman, so thank you for acknowledging that, and the Chief of Staff. But my question might just be around, did you get any oversight or feedback? You know, all the local boards have their local board plans, and they often have their advocacy items in there, and they probably come in and keep reinforcing those. How much attention was given to those local board plans? If it was mentioned to you by Auckland Transport, if you don't know, that's fine, but I would have hoped so.
Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to respond to that. There doesn't appear to be a very clear link between an advocacy item and a decision that was subsequently made within the RLTP. You cannot draw a direct link from the advocacy to any item.
Okay, are we ready to hear from our local boards? Yeah, that's right. So we're going to hear from 21 of our local boards. They each have 5 minutes, and then 2 questions. Are you guys okay with that? 2 questions to our local boards? All right, okay. We'll see how we go, right? Yeah. And we'll see how the 5 minutes goes as well. That's 5 minutes, 5 minutes. You weren't just going to be racist. Okay, so first up we have the Waitemata Local Board. Welcome back, Chair Northey and Deputy Chair Bonham. No wave at you guys, it means it's 5 minutes. Okay. Because there's no bell on this thing. Oh yeah, okay, cool.
Visual aids. I do visual aid. Thank you very much, visual aid. I remember about 3 years ago, the listener was not doing anything. I'm sorry, I'm too loud? I'm so sorry, Linda. Is that better? All right. I'm so sorry, I should...
Amir used to have that problem too. He came from Parliament.
Sorry, cancer, actor training. I'd like to acknowledge the work done by Graham Gunthorpe on this, our transport lead. He can't be here because of a new baby girl named Abby after the famous road. So I suspect that this is going to be a day where we all sort of talking to the same theme. So this is Waitemata Local Board's views. Number 1, climate change. It's clear from the figures presented that business as usual, even an improved business as usual, will be insufficient to meet Auckland's climate change goals. The target is to reduce transport emissions by 63 to 65%. The plan anticipates an increase of 6%. This is not good enough. We're huge supporters of rail, of CRL, and the positive effects it will have on the city centre. Huge amount of technical expertise has been brought into the country to design and build this project, but more rail lines are required, northwest, the city centre to Mangere, North Shore. We believe all of these projects should be developed and sequenced in a multi-decade work programme so that we keep the talent here and don't stop. Active modes, the Urban Cycleways programme is years behind schedule, and not enough funding is proposed in this 10-year programme. Every cycleway link that is built contributes massively to the headline goals of climate change reduction, mode shift and safety at a far lower cost than any other mode, and they vastly improve neighbourhoods, transforming streets into places. The city centre master plan is key for us. Access for everyone is a huge undertaking. Transforming the city centre, massively supported. It needs to be completed in parcels. However, the draft RLTP does not deliver much at all. At a minimum, in the next 10 years, we need to see a huge increase in bus efficiency, reducing the total number of vehicles and their diesel emissions, the Victoria Street Linear Park, the detuning of Fanshawe Street, the two-way treatment of Hobson and Nelson Streets, the most populated areas in the country, and a firm plan and agreed timelines for a zero emissions area. Sprawl. We're against it. We here in the Waitemata want many others to join us in this great part of our city. The NPS on urban development is likely to further increase the density of our area, but also allowing Greenfield to sprawl. The opportunity of the NPS is to increase the density of our area, allowing Greenfield sprawl to slow or stop. We do not support council resources being used to encourage sprawl on the region's fringe, and certainly not on the beautiful red soil in Franklin. It may reduce what we earn on the downtown car park not to offer affordable housing, but if you could get 100 apartments in there, how much would you save on having to actually extend infrastructure out into the Greenfields areas? So joined up thinking is great. Space reallocation, there needs to be more focus on reallocation of road space, creating bus and transit lanes. We know that buses are the workhorses of our transport system. Every time we see a bus stuck in traffic, that's a system failure. That's what is preventing our bus ridership from increasing. We know the problem areas. We need to listen to the ops teams, the drivers and other stakeholders, and implement new lanes immediately. But also a sense that buses just always arrive when they say they will and leave when they say they will, because if they leave early, that's a pain too. Renewal strategy. Every road renewal should be improving the built environment, making it safer for pedestrians and cyclists, nicer for residents, calmer for drivers, more efficient for buses. And with road pricing, we support congestion charging and want it introduced early, comprehensive, and to take vulnerable and less well-off road users into account. In addition, we think the creation of Wakefield Quarter low traffic neighbourhood should be a priority. In what other city is the Learning Quarter with all the students one of the dreariest parts of town? It has such potential. Nelson Street and Hobson Street, the most populated areas in the country. You know, we could draw more people there by making the street two-way and improving the amenity of the streetscape. There are a number of other projects that we want around in Parnell, the St George's Bay Road streetscape upgrade, safety projects, Cook Street, around schools in Newton Central and around Freeman's Bay School as well, where so many of those kids who live on Nelson and Hobson Streets have to get over the motorway to get to school. Or a school in town would also be awesome. And we would like to review requirements for a new RPZ to include the whole of Grey Lynn, Westmere and Kingsland, so that the problem doesn't always get pushed further out. I'd just like to finally note, I was asked the other day, what are the financial benefits of making our cities more diverse and inclusive? Well, a number of cities have followed our strategies to boost the economy and bring more people into the city centre. So what I would say is the financial cost of an urban plan that enables sprawl, that separates people from jobs, amenities and each other, and costs the city a higher and higher proportion of revenue to maintain, which is what the current RLTP is offering, is a mistake, and we should focus very much on the centre and our transport corridors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair Bonham. Okay, we have a question from Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoy your presentations, lots of energy. So just in relation, there's a lot in there, but specifically in relation to the investment in climate change, which you'd like to see an increase of, has your board put any thoughts into how that would be funded?
By not funding bad projects that might increase climate change? I think an integrated strategy is the answer. And if we have inclusionary zoning for affordable housing in Waitemata, then that will mean there is less demand further out.
Well, I guess as look at it from a regional perspective, how do we get that equity? Because you did talk about people, when you talked about congestion charging, you spoke about people who can't perhaps get out of the cars and how we have some equity around that. So if when you talk about bad projects, the bad projects are possibly funding those people to transition. So there's a...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that as a bad project. I meant more as in extending a motorway network and adding more lanes ad infinitum rather than reallocating what space we have more to rapid buses that you can totally rely on. There is absolutely an argument for park and rides as well. I understand my expertise is not outside, really, the Waitemata, but I think that if focus was put on answering those questions, that would be money well spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Councillor Casey.
The Deputy Mayor was positing light rail as a bad project. Alex, that wasn't what you had in mind either. Could you give me some examples?
So, Graham raised Mill Road corridor and said if it is to be built, it should be in the style of connected communities, with only one lane of general traffic in each direction, one bus lane in each direction, and separated cycle lanes. Speeds should be limited to 50 kilometres per hour or below. Under no circumstances should this corridor induce more general vehicles.
Good example, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, cool. Thank you, Waitemata Local Board, and our congratulations to Graham as well on the birth of Abby. Thank you. Next up we have Waitakere Rangers. Welcome, Saffron and Greg Pressland. Are you the new chair now? Oh, okay. Welcome, Chair Toms. Deputy Chair Pressland.
Thank you, Talofa Lava, and thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to quickly introduce. I've only just come in as the Chair for the Waitakere Rangers Local Board, and prior to that we had this lovely person on my left here, Greg, who was chairing the board and also leading with the process of coming up with our feedback on this important plan. Just quickly wanted to quickly address the issue of only 10 local boards having presented to Auckland Transport. There was a bit of a miscommunication or something that happened, and actually all of the boards, or pretty much all of us, were advised that we didn't really need to do both presentations because we would get this opportunity to present today. So, and given the very, very busy time that it was happening with all the different key pieces of feedback that needed to get in, we took that advice and didn't present, but we do regret not having that opportunity to speak to the panel. So our main concerns, before I hand over to Greg, is climate change, as in the previous presenters, and we need this plan is much more of a commitment to supporting the behaviour change that's really, really necessary, and included in part of that is the need to look at public transport and cycle lane, etc. provision as a network approach, and not to be looking at individual bus routes, for example, and their ability to be profitable. We need to be able to make sure that we are providing public transport options to all of our residents, and I'm talking in particular about our rural communities. I agree that there needs to be better engagement with local boards and the reinstatement of the local Transport Capital Fund, including specifically 3.5 million that was allocated to our local board that we have been saving for a local project. More commitment to placemaking, including the recognition of trees and permeable, the value of permeable surfaces and mitigating the heat island effect. The urban heat island effect. So I'll pass on to Greg now, but thank you very much.
Talofa Lava, Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity. We've given written feedback by way of 75 paragraphs, and I'm only going to address 2 points that we've raised. First, to re-emphasise Chair Tom's comment about climate change. Council's declared its climate emergency. Our local board has done the same. It's potentially the most devastating but most complex threat that humanity faces. It won't be solved overnight. To deal with it will require a sustained effort over decades, but we have to start now. Transport's the major contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, but if you think about the double tracking and electrification of rail, we started that in 2001, but it wasn't completed till 2015. And City Rail Link, which is absolutely vital, started 2016, but it won't be finished till 2024. So big, important projects have a big, long time frame, which is why we need to start them now. Reports suggest, if implemented, the RLTP will result in an net increase of greenhouse gas emissions during a time when Council and the country want to halve our greenhouse gas output, and we do believe that the RLTP needs to be braver. And dare I say it, but to raise the money to do that, we need to have a good look at our big roading projects. That's where the money can be cut, and we believe that there is a compelling argument to redivert resources. Which brings us to the second point, which is our Greenways plan. We support reinstatement of the local board capital transport fund, and we're pleased that councillors have worked to achieve this. The fund is greatly appreciated. In the past, we've used our fund to do things such as walkways, the Oratia cycleway, some safety improvements, and design work in Glen Eden. We have completed our draft Greenways plan, which provides for a network of walkways and cycleways in our rohi. And my personal view is that we should attempt to complete it within the next decade. This time frame is vital because round about then it's quite possible that petrol-driven cars are going to be phased out of the fleet. And we really need to give locals alternatives by walking and cycling in place by that time, so that can happen without too much disruption. As Chair Thoms mentioned, we also seek the reinstatement of $3.5 million, which was previously tagged for local board transport projects, and we'd been saving it up for local purposes. We appreciate the COVID emergency reasons why that fund wasn't there suddenly, but the fund could provide a significant boost to our efforts to progress our Greenways plans, and that's where we would urge you to somehow find the ability to reinstate that money. And we also advocate that there should be a commitment from AT and Council to fund other parts of our Greenways plan and other Greenways plans for other local boards areas in the near future. The plans have the benefit that they're intensely local, designed with local input, and they fill in the gaps. Currently, there are some really good cycleways and walkways, but they tend to be fragmented, and joining these paths up will increase their popularity considerably. If we could go to the next slide. That's a photograph on the right of a Piha bus that we discovered in all places on Aotea Island, Great Barrier, a few years ago. I thought it might be the last shuttle bus that we had serving Piha. Chair Thoms indicated that she can recall a service back in the 90s. Another part of our advocacy is the reinstatement of public transport to Piha and Tuia. And public transport certainly has its own very important part to play as the city tries to become carbon neutral. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have questions from Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely excellent presentation. Well done. Just a very small question regarding a bus trial to Piha. Would you consider that to be a local service, or do you consider it to be regionally significant?
A very good question, Councillor. I welcome the opportunity to dig into that a bit deeper. I think that it would be both. I mean, I think it's an essential local service to be able to support our communities to use public transport on their commutes, but also equally it will enable people from all around the region to be able to get into the park using alternative means rather than private vehicles. Thank you.
If I could just further comment, we have discussed with a local transport provider the possibility of this sort of service, and they've indicated that there should be a local market for it, but there is also a regional market for this sort of service. The problem obviously will be that it would have to be subsidised. No public transport anywhere operates without a subsidy.
Councillor Newman.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I've read the submission. It's a good submission. I mean, the issues that you've raised in relation to the dearth of public transport services is another example of the public transport operating model not working for a lot of communities where there is quite low patronage. I'm not sure I agree with the school busing because that's contracted under a separate model. But with respect to rideshare, you've raised... you've effectively, what you've done is proposed a form of rideshare of Para 34. Auckland Transport's been working through a number of options with Waka Kotahi around funding ride share options in other parts of the region. Has there been any discussion about a contracted trial with Waka Kotahi in your part of Auckland? Because I would have thought that actually that's not a bad idea in relation to Piha, and that could be something that could be funded as a hybrid of a ride share option. Has that been discussed previously between Auckland Transport and Waka Kotahi to the best of your knowledge?
No, it hasn't. In our discussions with this provider, they're a private company that's used to have a considerable tourism service that they provided. And the PT problem that you mentioned is the very first hurdle that we struck. There's no way to easily achieve this sort of service without jumping through all the hoops that the public transport legal requirements have in place already.
But presumably, if there was a funding contract that were to become available with Waka Kotahi supporting, that there would be a local provider that could be contracted for the delivery of that.
I did a quick delve into the Land Transport Management Act, and it's not as simple a thing as someone putting their hand up. There's all sorts of hoops you've got to jump through.
If I could just add to that, Councillor Newman, this shuttle bus initiative has been in the local board's plan for, this is the third term now. And when we first raised it with Auckland Transport, we had several discussions around the Kowhai Express that was happening in North Auckland, and sort of lots of. It relates to the point around better engagement with local boards, I think. So, we felt like we were going down a track and we were getting somewhere and getting some traction, and then it all rolled back and it didn't happen. And this has happened in at least 3 different forms, the latest one being the offer to trade an express bus service in order to get our shuttle bus. And that was prior to the COVID emergency budget. And so that was a big sell from Auckland Transport. They said it wouldn't really make any difference, so we agreed to it. And then obviously the emergency budget came along. We lost the express buses. It's had a major impact locally, and we've still got no shuttle buses. I just if I could also address your concerns about the school buses as well. I also. The combination, the idea of combining school buses with public transport, I personally had a sort of a gut reaction of I don't really know if I'd want to send my kids on that bus, but apparently it works very well. We have another issue related to that, which is the education department not particularly being that married up with Auckland Transport in terms of the infrastructure that's available for pedestrians to walk to the nearest bus stop. So we've got people we're living, I don't know if anyone's familiar with our area, but in Paro, in the bottom, right down the bottom by the dam, who are not funded to go on a public education service because they live in proximity to the bus stop of a public bus, which is up the top of the hill by Victory Road. So it's a long, long way, a very steep, windy hill, fast travelling vehicles and 0 footpaths. And that's the kind of situation that our communities are in. And I guess again on the network thing, we've got a specific point there about trying to have a network approach in terms of having electric vehicle charging stations around the place. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation and your 75 paragraphs. Much appreciated.
Oh, and can I just actually thank Brett Lane as well, our staff member, who's done an amazing job to support us with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, members, we have Puke Tāpapa Local Board, John Turner. Welcome, Chair Turner.
Manuia Le Taiao, Deputy Chair, haven't quite got the promotion. So we've just got 2 slides to speak to. Aroha mai for Skyping in, but we've actually got a workshop today. so I'll make this brief. So we support the increased investment into climate change, but as we've already heard, and I'm sure you'll be hearing throughout the day, we note that the RLTP doesn't meet those targets set out in Te Tāruki a Tāwhiri. Support the establishment of the LBTCF. We really like the Community Connect program. This is an excellent initiative. Noting we have a really high level of deprivation in some parts of our board area, and connecting people up to public transport and enabling the move away from the private car and all the costs that entails is a really positive move. The focus on the Auckland Housing Program is really important for us. Noting the huge Kāinga Order work program we've got going on in Mount Roskill, with 3,000 homes becoming over 11,000 now, and all the private builds that are going on which aren't being captured in that number. Development of rapid transit down Dominion Road. We really support the increase of green infrastructure in the transport corridor, so that's things like rain gardens. Kāinga Order are doing really good work around this at the moment in suburban streets with rain gardens around Freeland Avenue, noting the massive effects that has on Awa and Moana. We really support the increased use of Future Connect. We note that one example, Mill Road doesn't score highly as a project compared to other cheaper projects that will have an immediate effect on safety, traffic congestion, lots of other things. Really support initiatives around making areas around schools safer. So poor infrastructure often exists around schools, and we can make massive gains around reducing carbon emissions and congestion by reducing the number of parents dropping kids off to school. We had a pretty big project on one side of Mount Roskill Grammar, which has been really useful, and then on the other side we don't have that, and so looking forward to that coming up in the next decade. And we really support increased investment in interactive transport, noting all of the positive benefits that brings, which I'm sure you all know very well. Next slide, please. So we request continued protection of the Avondale Southdown rail corridor in the RLTP, and we'd like investigation into connecting that into the frequent transit network. So that would be in connecting the loop up of the rail network, which was planned in 1950, was designed before the motorway network was designed, but unfortunately hasn't happened. We really request the investigation into a cycle link between Queenstown and Hillsborough Road being reinstated into the RLTP. So it was in the past one, there was $3 million set aside, and that's now disappeared. This is a really important role this section plays. It connects up the $25 million of spend that's in the RLTP for South Auckland. This is the main route to get through to the Isthmus, and at the moment it's a really dangerous steep hill, narrows to one way, really bad surfacing, causes lots of conflict between cars and cyclists. We've requested an increase in funding for footpath repairs and upgrades, including accessibility issues. Our area has low walkability scores and a legacy of underinvestment into footpaths, and what someone mentioned at one of the last meetings about how every transport movement requires people using the footpath, so it's really important that we're putting money into those. We'd like to see a leverage of the investment into street trees in the LTP, and so lots of boards are doing the urban ngāhere projects. There's 14 million in the LTP for street trees, so would like to see that reflected in the RLTP as well. Alignment between there's a table saying what the results of the RLTP will be, and then there's the what's needed by 2031, and unfortunately they don't match up. And for us, the key focus is keeping vehicle kilometres travelled at the same level that it currently stands. We'd like a reassessment of the spending on new roads and reinstatement of the Healthy Street Framework as approved by the AT Board in 2018. That's us.
Ma'alua lava. Thank you, Chair Turner. And we have a question. We have a question from Councillor Casey.
Thanks, John. As you know, quite a few written questions have been asked of Auckland Transport with regard to Puki Tāpapa's footpath budget, if any. But I know that you personally have done a lot of work on footpaths in Puki Tāpapa area, and I recall a teddy bear taking a walk around all the footpaths. Can you just tell the council that we know the state of the footpaths in Puki Tāpapa? If you could just talk to that for 1 minute, that would be great.
Yep, no worries. So in the Mount Roskill Borough days, it was chosen to fund footpaths to be built to only, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, it's 800 millimetres. So there's lots of really skinny footpaths with massive cracks in them. There's a lack of pram crossings. So when people get to a road, they can't just roll their tram or wheelchair or anything like that along. All along Dominion Road, the footpaths are very small, and then you get to what would be the Mount Eden Borough Council, and they're suddenly a whole lot wider. There's a lot of walkways between cul-de-sacs, which is really great, but they're in quite poor condition. Unfortunately, we face the similar issues that across the isthmus about people parking on footpaths and then causing damage to them. So it's we're working on building recognition that that's a problem, but it's also the footpaths are cracked, so people go, oh well, they're already ruined, why shouldn't I do it? And we've had people who are currently emailing the mayor about the state of footpaths in Linfield. So lots to do, and acknowledge that AT have done, I think it was 6 financial year, off the top of my head, I could have made that up, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Thank you very much, Chair Turner, for your workshop.
Malo.
Thank you, Malo. Henderson Massey, is it okay if we take Orake now, as Sarah has to go? Thank you very much. Apologies for the delay in the programming. There was no way on earth we were going to be able to start our local boards at 10 a.m. So I'm not too sure why local board services did that. So apologies to our local boards that we are not going by their schedule of 10 a.m. start. Please, over to you. Thank you. Are you the chair now? Or?
No, and Chair Scott Milne gives his apologies because he's unable to be here.
You're the transport portfolio holder.
Yes, I am.
Welcome, member.
Right.
Pori.
I think I've... Is that right? Turned it on. Thank you. Tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our feedback on the Regional Land Transport Plan on behalf of the Orake Local Board. We would like to endorse the direction of the plan. The shift from private car use to public transport and active modes is crucial if we are to meet the Climate Commission targets and enable better travel choices. Our board area has majority community support for the climate change proposals in the long-term plan. However, we'd like to emphasise the following. A coordinated approach, along with strong relationships between local providers of services, including the transport agencies and the local board, is vitally important if we are to achieve the best outcomes as our communities grow and intensify. We know our area and can provide good insight into local issues and input and support for local projects. To this end, we are looking forward to the reinstatement of the Local Board Transport Capital Fund and appreciate the support of our Auckland Transport elected member relationship partner. So urban planning needs to link density and quality infrastructure for cycling and walking. We are pleased to see the inclusion in the RLTP of walking and cycling projects in our area to provide safe and viable travel choices. We would like to see an overarching strategy for local board areas within which local projects sit. So this would enable us to work with AT and other agencies to prioritise spending. A coordinated approach would generate the best outcomes and increase the viability of individual projects. This would alleviate the piecemeal approach when some projects are presented. So this strategy will need to be accompanied by education and consultation. We will need to make more effort to engage wider representation when consulting across our community with meaningful numbers of people, representing different socio-economic groups, age groups and ethnicities. Change is always threatening. We think funding for significant engagement will help allay fear. We also think the consultation could be spread across local boards. For example, changes in the city centre, the Orake local board area have a number of constituents who spend and visit the city centre, and it would be great if we could be included in consultation that covers major areas of our city. Now, the next slide, we can see a section of Te Ara Kei Utu Ki Tai. This is the path of land and sea, which will create safe and viable travel choices for people to connect between Tamaki, Glen Innes and the city. And with connecting trains and buses, there are train stations along the route. It will play a role in reducing emissions and help us meet climate change targets. So this image shows stage 2 of the shared path along the magnificent Pruiwa Valley. And this is going to be an exceptional addition to our walking, cycling infrastructure. Now, initially, there was no provision for a cross-valley connecting route for access between Meadowbank and Kohimarama. So the arrows indicate the direction of the crossing, and we are really pleased to see this connection included in the RLTP. We believe this is the single biggest thing the Ōrākei Local Board can do this term to reduce our collective carbon footprint locally. Congestions on our roads as our neighbourhoods intensify causes increased travel times and increased emissions. The local links create genuine new choices for hundreds of residents, and without this vital link, the effectiveness of the pathway is restricted. So there's lots of modelling that's been done around this, around daily users and the effect it will have. Local children walking to school. The major schools are on the other side of the valley, so there's a lot of people who actually have to travel right up and around the top. So we just want to advocate, and we're thrilled to see this project included. So in the next slide, we can see section 4 just completes the journey to Tamaki Drive, and it will link up the network, which is so important to get people safely on all the way from Glen Innes, in which we're seeing huge growth into town, or along Tamaki Drive, or to connect with buses and trains. So we think this is a great advantage for the whole city to see this completed. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and we look forward to seeing the completion of the walking and cycling projects in our area.
Awesome. Thank you. Member Puri? No questions? Puri.
Puri, yeah. It's a difficult name.
No questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And welcome Henderson Massey, Brooke Loader and Brenda Brady.
Morning everyone.
Nā,
Talofa
lava.
Morning Chair Bartley.
Morning. That sounds good, eh? I'll stick with that.
Sounds good, yes. There you go.
Yeah.
So once again, it is great to be before the governing body here to advocate on behalf of Henderson Massey. I'm here with our Deputy Chair, Brenda Brady, and we're here presenting our submissions on the RLTP. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Coombs' comments in terms of the process, and acknowledge that this is quite frustrating for us because this is our only real way that we can advocate on the RLTP, as we were too advised that we didn't have to attend that hearing, that Auckland Transport hearings panel process. It seems like the plan had been developed around us, and this is our only first time real input on it. So for that reason, I'd like to urge you to read through our comprehensive submissions, and we will only be speaking to them briefly today. But when you boil it down, basically it reflects our key outcomes of our Henderson Massey Local Board Plan, where we want to make sure that our own unique nuances as Henderson Massey are taken into consideration when you collate your feedback. We're encouraged by the Planning Committee, which is generally supportive of the RLTP, but we are concerned whether these outcomes will be delivered for the West. Our population in Henderson Massey is quite diverse. We've got 120,000 people with high areas of need, and we have quite a young age demographic, with 36% of our population being born overseas and 16% being of Māori descent. So it is important to have transport infrastructure funding allocated in a way that best serves the needs of our community in a fair and equitable way. So you'll have before you the key areas on the slides up here that Henderson Massey supports, and Brenda will speak to these more in detail. But in essence, we want Henderson Massey to be a great place to live, work and play, where people have safe footpaths, access to public transport, well-maintained roads. But the proof really is in the pudding about whether our aspirations will be realised in this plan. In our plan, we want everyone to contribute to building resilience and living sustainably. That's reflected in the climate change outcomes in RLTP, so we support those generally. And outcome 5 is we want it to be easy to get around safely without using a car, so that we have local travel options that are easily available to meet a large number of needs. This contributes to health and well-being, helps reduce our carbon emissions and congestion, reduces pollution in our streams and waterways too. But firstly, can you as councillors just raise your hand if you took some kind of sustainable transport today? Did you take a car? So who actually walked, cycled or took public transport? Okay, so this is... Yeah, thank you. So this is us here today, but imagine if you are stuck in the transport poverty-stricken Ranui, Massey, Glendine, what they don't even have access to public transport, let alone have options to be able to do what you've done today. So we need to make it more accessible for these people through this plan. So Brenda's going to continue in terms of our specific advocacy items.
Okay, I'm speaking more to the wider RLTP and feedback. For all of our network, for all of our roading and our public transport network to function effectively and to be equitable, we have to have the minimum levels of service across all of Auckland. At the moment, the importance of PT network in the west and the northwest is very, very important. The northwest is a growth area, and the west needs a lot of new public transport services. We don't have good connections at present, and unfortunately some of those connections are not being as well used with the COVID issues going on. Many in the west work in the south and in the central city, and many families are struggling with day-to-day costs. So remember this with the congestion charging planning, because a lot of our people have no choice but to take the jobs wherever they are available, and they travel across in their vehicles across town. It's not ideal for them, but it is the only way they're able to get sustainable employment in many cases. The need to fund the Northwest Indicative Strategic Transport Network, and I did find my brochure from our discussions a while ago, is very important to us, because you can't even put public transport in when you don't have a good network in place. To fund the roading system for the Northwest Growth Area, and we need to improve the links to Kumeu and Huapai. So that's on our boundary, but they can sit for an hour, nose to tail, just going from Huapai to Westgate. The roading system just does not support the Northwest Growth Area, and therefore the bus and public transport system can't either, because they're just blocked. Better employment opportunities are essential to a successful Northwest development area, and safe connections are important as well. So we're very aware we don't have the employment in the west that we need. People do take State Highway 18 over the shore, but most of them go to the city. The integrated PT interchange upgrade at Henderson in time for the CRL is very important. And the absolute importance of providing a full Northwest State Highway 16 dedicated busway is essential. The buses are still going off and on and getting held up. As the current planned small interchanges at Lincoln and Te Atatu Road will be outgrown in only a few years, they are not, I understand, a long-term solution. The brownfield growth around Henderson Metropolitan Centre is starting to move ahead. A final matter is the Tifao pathway. Madam Chair, if I can just speak to that. It links Avondale, Newland, Glendine, Te Atatu, and then State Highway 16 to Massey and Westgate. So it provides tremendous opportunities. Part of it's been funded, but we do need to see that all those linkages to make that work actually happen and are funded, which I presume that the RLTP can actually contribute to that as well. Because you're not just on the water, you're actually in the side streets, that you need those connections. Okay. Long term, the planning for light rail to Westgate is supported, but we realise it's a long-term project.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brooke. We have 3 questions for you. Councillor Newman, Councillor Cooper, and then IMSB member Henare.
Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. I read the submission that you've sent through, the notes that you've sent through. At paragraph 17, you indicate the board's support for new and extended park and ride facilities, and you want to support an approach where those new park and rides should be located in a peripheral location. Would you support a parking charge for said facilities?
We're actually looking at areas that even have some park and ride now. So up at Westgate, I think that area is new growth, but it's also serving people who are struggling as well up in Massey around Westgate. So if you do park and ride up there, there needs to be some way of balancing it, because there's definitely people up there who can use a park and ride, hop on public transport and can afford to pay. There's people who can't, and I don't know how you are going to deal with that split, because it must be happening in the south as well. As far as other areas, the Sunnyvale, there's an opportunity at Sunnyvale Rail Station for better park and ride, which links with Waitakere Rangers' aspirations.
Charging or free?
I think that area could probably afford charge, but you're going to get a mix. You're going to have to obviously work out a program for the whole of Auckland. I understand that.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you to you both. You've answered my question around the busway because it's critical, though it will be short-term advantage unless we go full Monty. I'm interested, we've got a lot of Kainga-Ora redevelopment in the area, as well as the take-up very proactively in the development sector of the FAB zones and our usual single house zones. I just wanted to know, in terms of your local projects to help people be safe and be able to get around, what's your funding envelope for being able to do what you think will deliver safe and, I suppose, and efficient mobility?
Our local ward transport capital fund, which we will be very pleased to get that back, we actually have put that to the Henderson school zone. So we had to be very careful about how we used the money that we had. And there's 3,000 students in 7 schools in that area. We haven't... we have a connections plan, but we quite honestly, which we're focusing back on connecting to Tūwhao Pathway, but we honestly don't have the funding to go ahead ourselves and develop some of those better connections. There's very little leeway in our budgets at the moment for actually making street changes.
So, and if I may add as well, we have money, but it's not enough. For example, our Henderson North Home and School Zone, we were quoted a couple $100K to get that done. That was last year. Auckland Transport came back to us a couple of weeks ago and said, oh, that'll only do 2 roads. We need the whole suburb covered. And so what we want to do and what the community wants us to do cannot be met by what's currently in store for us.
Okay, thank you. IMSB member Tauhinere has withdrawn his question, so we thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to welcome Chair Pulu Rees o Tangawaya from Otara Papatoe. Okay, you can go take your photos in the reception area. Malo lau awhiunga a Pulu.
Langi mamaina, happy Samoan Language Week. Talofa to Chair Bartley and the committee members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity for me to come and present on behalf of our Otara Papatoetoe Local Board on the RLTP. I have a few points I'd like to make. So, firstly, we need to ensure there is equity in RLTP decisions. The Otara Papatoetoe Local Board Our fundamental concern is that the RLTP planning must ensure recovery for those worst affected, otherwise the gap between people and communities will worsen. I have slides here with some stats and graphs on there, so I'm sure that you'll have access to it. But one interesting fact is that 85% increase in unemployment of those over 25 in West and South Auckland. Equity needs to underpin our collective action. And why do I say collective? Well, the proposed long-term plan budget talks about e-vehicles, so does the RLTP. And in my opinion, that's an individualistic option that only affluent families will be able to access and not our communities. I know that there's talk of a concession card, and again, a portion of our community will be able to access that, but our working class families, a lot of them don't actually qualify for the community service card. So our local board wants council to advocate to central governments for free public transport. This would be a collective response that all benefit from. We have varied commuter needs, such as the thousands of students that travel from South Auckland into the city. We have service workers, we have tradespeople, but we also have shift workers. Public transport must meet the needs of all, not just office workers. We need to support and invest in measures to make the mode shift from cars to public transport a reality. At this point, I actually want to say thank you. Thank you to the councillors, all those over the last few years that have supported the investment in public transport in South Auckland. Last term, we opened the Manukau bus station, and in a few weeks' time, we will open the Puanui interchange. But that reflects the importance of Manukau as a metropolitan centre and the sub-regional impact that it has not only in Auckland City, but across to Waikato. But I must say that's only part of the picture. The A to B, so airport to Botany, we asked that the light rail for A to B, that is from the Auckland Airport to Puanui Station, through State Highway 20B to Manukau, and then through to Botany. This needs to be fast-tracked. Manukau City Council has already protected that route, and unlike the City to Mangere light rail, so we need to build it properly now. We've got to invest to make our public transport a viable option. What Kainga Ora is doing in Mangere, 30,000 people to be added into Mangere, that's also going to happen in Otara. And so this A to B line actually goes through Otara. Furthermore, we also support local and social procurement. This plan is an opportunity we can make a difference by committing procurement practices that support local businesses and contractors. Contracts with an expectation of good quality, sustainable jobs, particularly for our populations, Māori and Pacific and young people in South Auckland. Our other advocacy or points that we want to highlight is safety, as mentioned by the council staff. Our board is investing in one of the Innovating Streets project. Ours is still going, but in Papatoi West, it's an example of our priority on safety and on roads. But we ask that the RLTP investment give high weightage to local safety projects in areas where there's housing development and growth. The consequent congestion from increased movements of people to access services or facilities needs to be mitigated in time. Lastly, but not least, we need to prioritise greening. Prioritise greening of the road and rail corridors in southern areas. Otara Papatoetoe has the second lowest tree canopy coverage. That's second to Mangere Otahu, which is next door to us. There was a report a few years back that said climate change will affect South Auckland communities the most for a range of reasons, but including low tree coverage. We need to plan funding partnerships to deliver the local Ngahere action plan in areas of housing growth and transport projects and help mitigate carbon emissions. Thank you for your time.
Haftatile Lava, Chair Apolo. We have two questions for you, Councillor Dalton and Councillor Watson.
Talofa Race, thank you for that, and it was an excellent presentation. and it all makes perfect sense to me. My question for you is, when you talk to Auckland Transport or anybody in the policy area, do you ever get a response to your inquiries about equity and how to transition our people into electric cars or onto public transport? Is there ever anything more than a shrug of the shoulders because the answer isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. The answer isn't there. We haven't seen it in the RLTP either. And there's a whole lot of infrastructure that needs to go on. No one's talked about that either. So before we even get to can our families afford it, is the infrastructure even there to begin with? So definitely I agree that there's been no advice, at least for us.
Tawhatai.
Councillor Watson.
Talofa Rees, thank you for your presentation. Just picking up one of your graphs there to do with that very disturbing growth in the job seeker support across all groups, Maori, Pacifica, European and others in your ward, which is really stark. You mentioned the advocacy of the council in terms of like free public transport. Do you think there's a case to be made, if that's not doable, for some of the models of other countries where you maybe have like very low price, or as they have in Vienna, like a year pass, which works out incredibly cheap? You know, might be something like $6 a week or $7 a week. They've got that for their subway over there. Does that strike a chord in terms of the potential choices from zero to something that's a lot better than what we've got now with some of these options in between?
We'll definitely take whatever gets closest to zero. I think barriers of cost is a barrier of cost. So I think when you try and slice it as much as possible, our advocacy will always be for free public transport for our people. But if anything close will be better than nothing.
Thank you very much, Apulu, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.